Good evening. Today we're going to examine a topic that is not necessarily well understood. It is often talked about, and it is fundamental to any organization that's trying to benefit from growth, wherever that may be. It may be in a physical aspect, it may be in a financial aspect, and we're going to focus on a topic. That topic is advertising. So let's just start off by identifying for ourselves what is advertising, because I think that's where a lot of misunderstanding starts. Some people refer to it as marketing. When I hear that, I listen to it, and yes, it is a form of marketing, but marketing is really a topic that is part of selling. So advertising is an integral part of the selling process. And it is better understood to be the lead generation process of the selling process. In a Toastmasters Club environment, what is our objective? Our objective is to sign and gain more members. We use advertising to try and introduce ourselves to others so that they can have the opportunity of coming to our meetings and ultimately make a decision to sign on the dotted line to buy membership. So whether we realize it or not, we are involved in the process of selling. And advertising is the beginning of that process. Now, how do we currently go about advertising? My observation is the majority of the advertising that we engage in is using word of mouth. We use email. We make use of printed brochures. We set up basic websites, and some clubs will make limited use of social media, tools like Facebook. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today, these tools that are referred to as social media. Now, I have an opinion that I have formed over a long period of time, and that is advertising takes two forms. That when you're tackling this topic, that there are two forms of advertising: impression advertising and productive advertising. And when we are making choices, when we allocate resources to advertising, we should be very clear what type of advertising we're wanting to exploit. Impression advertising is where there's constant messaging that continues to the point where the consumer remembers your message, even if it's on a subconscious basis. It must be sustained over a long period of time to work. It is expensive. Customers buy from you at the time they feel they need to buy your product or service, and hopefully at that moment in time, they remember you. This form of advertising is difficult to make any assessments on. It's easy to manage. You just set an arbitrary figure. It could be 2% of sales. That's what McDonald's does. And they just set aside that amount of money for advertising, and they just spend until they use up their advertising budget. And it makes organizations feel like something is being done. And over a long period of time, this can be effective. So examples of impression style advertising is yellow pages, billboard ads, radio ads, public service ads on cable TV, and making use of our static one-page websites or blogs. Productive advertising is something different again. It is advertising in which it's designed to invoke a reaction. It can lead to perceptible sales. It usually follows a path. Discovery of prospective customers, then you take that information, maybe ask questions, qualify them as a lead. You then go through a process that you introduce your products and services, maybe give a quote as to cost, and then finally, that leads to the closing of the sale. Examples of productive advertising is sending someone a survey, and you ask them, would you like to be placed on a mailing list? That would be productive. Setting up a trade show booth where you present your information and you try and sell memberships on the spot. A permanent sign outside where you're holding your Toastmasters Club meeting. A sandwich sign that directs people into your meeting. That's productive advertising. Setting up a referral program. We talk about it, but we don't really do it very well in Toastmasters. We don't recognize, go out of our way to recognize individuals that bring in a member, and these individuals I refer to as rainmakers because they bring in more than one new member. Sometimes organizations will offer, a cash incentive or a free package of services. We really don't do that very well, and it's a form of productive advertising. So when we ask the question, how much money needs to be spent on advertising? And your advertising budget can be as little as $0, or you can spend as much money as you want. Many organizations are prepared to pay significant amounts of money for their advertising. Toastmasters Club, we're challenged. We usually have limited resources. And this is due to the fact that really we're a nonprofit organization, and our parent organization doesn't necessarily encourage things like fundraising, funds that can be spent and deployed in things like advertising. Any advertising that takes place usually is at the head office level, and so individual clubs have to rely upon the funds donated to their by their own membership to create the funds for advertising. So in most cases, clubs have very limited budgets. Now I want to introduce a key topic here. Advertising is not free and has never been free. It can cost you financial resources and it can cost you human time resources, but it's not free. You can articulate a process by which you are spending minimum amounts of money, but that doesn't change the fact that you have to be prepared to commit some resources, whether it's financial or whether it's in human time resources. Advertising is not free. Advertising does not naturally lead to sales. There's not a correlation. It also requires self-judgment. You can seek out consultants, but you should be very jaded. Maybe call someone that's an expert in radio advertising. Most advertising consultants are individuals that are most happy to spend your money. I have stories. I'm not going to necessarily delve into them, but firsthand experience tells me that, wow, these people are really willing to spend your money. And you have to decide if you're getting and achieving the results that you need to achieve. So it needs to be managed. And there's a need for experimentation because every circumstance is different. Every market is different. Every market is composed of different demographics, different geography, different profiles of individuals that are to be targeted for advertising. One size will never fit all and never has. So issues like pricing and service offerings change based on your audience. Issues like available alternative choices, your competition, play a role. Dale Carnegie's a competitor. There's other organizations that compete, either discreetly or indiscreetly, such as locally here in Saskatchewan, Sask Polytech teaches courses in business communication. They're a competitor, and we have to recognize that. One of the things we need to do is to really identify what our target audience is, and that's different for each Toastmasters club. We have to ask ourselves, who are the audience that we want to speak to? Who are the individuals that what we do provides a really meaningful service that you can certainly prosper with? And do we fulfill their needs? Now, when we're talking about advertising, one thing that's also very important to manage is we're always selling the sizzle, but never the steak. We want to whet people's appetite. We want them to come into our meetings, and then we can start serving the steak. Now, I could spend a lot of time talking about demographics, and if you take formal training in advertising, as I had when I was taking my MBA, you are in love with the idea of identifying demographics. And there's quantitative formulas that are available to help you make decisions on where you're going to be spending your resources. But unfortunately, there's a sad reality. And the sad reality is during the 1990s, which was cost-cutting time, we heard words like utilization, efficiency, right-sizing, all these words. One of the things that went out the airlock is people doing surveys to identify who their customers are. Radio stations don't do it. Television stations don't do it. It's actually astonishing how many organizations offer advertising, but they have no demographic information to pass on to you because they don't do it anymore as a cost-cutting measure. But if you can get demographic information, which is difficult, which is why we go back to using experimentation. But during this process, you're asking yourself, what are the age of our customers? What are their educational profiles? What are their needs? What technical knowledge do they have? And is what we're doing going to enhance their income and assist in the development of their occupation? Of course, when we're advertising, we are putting forward a brand. Now, we can co-opt the branding that's given to us by Toastmasters International, or we can develop our own branding for our own club that helps us to identify and fill niches we have identified. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, a club might make a decision to tailor its program so that it's of interest to people who volunteer to work on a board of directors for churches or condominiums. If you're sitting in with a club in downtown Toronto, oh my goodness, there's literally hundreds of condominiums in the downtown core within walking distance of a meeting location. And every one of them is run by board of directors of 8 people that are having meetings and doing them for the first time and having to make speeches, and they're a really interesting target market to go after. And you may brand yourself as providing something special to those individuals. So what are the channels available for advertising? Well, there's legacy channels, which usually cost money. Radio, television, newspapers that are fading away, billboards, broadcast faxing. These are all legacy channels, and they invariably cost money. Newly emerging channels are things like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, all these social media outlets that are new, relatively new. And let's talk about those today. And so Google, we think of it as a search engine, but it's much more than that. Google are the new white pages, and we're going to be talking about that. And we would never think twice in the past buying a white page listing in the phone book, because when people were looking for something, they would find us there. And I remember a time in which there was a universal phone number in Regina for all the clubs, and people would call into that, and that information would be passed on to the clubs by the division director. I remember those days. And they're far in our past, but there was a white pages ad in the phone book that drew a lot of interest, that which I found interesting, and I sort of miss to this day. One of the questions we also are going to be asking ourselves is, when someone does a Google search, can we get ourselves on page 1 of the Google search? Not page 2, not page 3, because people have very limited attention span. So how can we, as a strategy, get on that page 1? How can we do that? That's an interesting topic. So we need to adopt strategies to work with search engines, and not just Google. Bing is a search engine, and there's others. And I'm going to introduce tonight a concept, that being landing pages. It's a funny term. What are we talking about? And we'll explore this. Now let's start talking about a simple thing a Toastmasters club can do to position themselves and advertise at no direct financial cost, but it costs you time. Now, I remember in the year 2000 working away, and they're talking about the great market crash of all the software companies. Most people don't remember any of this, which is fine. But one of the things that was happening was that the formal telephone companies were not doing well. And there was a surplus of switches that were coming available in the market. And a company called Google went around buying them all up. And most people don't think of Google as a telephone company, but it actually has quietly in place more infrastructure for telephone switching than all the other phone companies in North America combined. They created a product called Android that's used on many smartphones. Google is in the telephone business and has been for a long time. And to operate a telephone, you need to have yellow pages, white pages for advertising. But Google doesn't talk about that openly. And I've watched with quiet fascination that they keep renaming their white pages every 2 or 3 years. And so it's hard to find, and I think it's quite intentional. But today, and there's been many names. The last name was Google Places. Now it's called Google Business Profile. And if you have a Google Gmail, you can apply to get a Google Business Profile. And this is quite important. For example, I have here an example that when you do a search and you click onto it, you can actually see here a picture, and you can even have things like meeting times or opening times, location for the organization. And make no mistake, every Toastmasters club can have their own listing. They just have to set it up. And it's a bit of an interesting process because it's not instant. You first have to set up a Gmail account in the name of the club. So my home club is Weekend Wordmasters. Maybe I set up an account called wwt@gmail.com. Then I apply for a Google business account based on the same login. And then I can put in an address, and it can show me everything at that address. And you can add a listing for no charge about your organization. But there's a trick. The trick is when you add it, it's sitting in a temporary status. And they will actually mail a card to that address. And when you receive the card, you have to call up the listing and enter a verification number. If you're verified, everything changes. Now, why does it change? Well, you have to think of Google Business Profile as yellow pages. And the way that the search engines work for Google is that they trust their own information first. So once you're verified, your listing changes. And if someone does a search and you've got an interesting business name that's descriptive, including the word Toastmasters, you're going to show up when they make that search. People ask me constantly, how is it that your club is always listed when I do a search? We've had people come to our club because they came to Regina, they didn't know what to do. They Googled in Toastmasters and they found us. They found our website and they came out as a guest. So you have to verify the ad. And so here's the address along the bottom. And here's an example of the listing that I'm talking about. I have Pile of Bones, I have Weekend Wordmasters, and they're verified. And they're verified with a fixed address. And Weekend Wordmasters was originally at an address in College. I now have it at 3426 Saskatchewan Drive. But make no mistake, by having these ads verified, they will show up when someone does a Google search, and it doesn't cost any money to the club. And so, and as time goes on, the longer your listing is in place, the higher ranked it gets when people do a search. So this is a big step, and I do this for a lot of my clients, this service, just to help them out. So here's just an example of a potential ad, and you have to just edit your business information. You can add a photo of the location where your club is, or a photo of a meeting. That can be, and there's no charge. So using Google Business and using their profile manager is a low cost way, but you have to invest time to A, set up the listing, B, have it verified, and C, maintain it. Now, when we have searches done on Google, I'm by by accident a notary public among many things, and a lot of people ask me, Randall, when I type in notary public, why is it that your name appears on page 1? Why is that? Same thing goes as a marriage commissioner. And a sort of chuckle. Because long ago, maybe 15 years, I used something called Blogger, which is now owned by Google. And I set up a blog for myself. And I was a witness in a speech at one of my Toastmasters club that talked about search spiders. Now that's a terminology that people don't use anymore. But what it basically means is that when you set up a website, most people just set up a one-page website. You shouldn't do that. You should add lots of pages. And you should fill the website with lots of phraseology. And for example, on my blog as a marriage commissioner, I've gone around and taken pictures over the years of all the places where I've done weddings, and I do a little write-up. And I talk about a great place to have a wedding is at Regina Floral Conservatory. Now that phrase, great place to have a wedding, someone may be searching that, which will take them to my page, which then they discover I'm a marriage commissioner. And I've had lots of people find me this way. So one of the things we need to do, and again, this is where we have to invest time, is we have to tell stories. And this is a big idea in social media. We have to tell stories. And the thing about us as Toastmasters, we have speeches every meeting where people are telling stories. We can leverage all those stories to help people to find us. So if someone does a speech on how to grow roses, there should be a little write-up done. You can save time by asking the person who did the speech, can you give us a word version of your speech? And you just cut and paste and you make an article. Mr. King talked about yellow roses in the fall. And you have a whole little article. The article gets attached to your webpage. And all the phrases that are in it, when people do searches, they will find it. And the longer the web page is in place, and the more of these phrases you build into the web, the easier it is for people to find it. So we can tell stories about how to improve your communication skills, how to be better at doing a webinar, how to teach others to make their presentations effective, how to use effective evaluation to do an interview. All these things we can tell in stories in writing that we attach to our webpage. One thing we can do to make it easier for people to find us is you can go to GoDaddy, spend $40 a year, and put your free host website onto a domain that's easy to remember. That's easy to tell someone over the phone. I belong to the Weekend Wordmasters Toastmasters Club. We could just condense that to Wordmasters, wordmasters.com. In which case you say, our webpage is Wordmasters. And they don't even need to, how do you spell it? They don't even have to say that because it's easy to listen to, easy to type, and easy for them to find you. We have these long, complex URL domain addresses. You can just make it into a really simple one that's easy to help people to find you. So that's just one suggestion on how you can improve and make your website, and it's a great resource from Toastmasters International, but just having a static one-page website blog, it isn't as effective as putting lots of stories into the content. Given some examples, training in public speaking and webinars, training in running meetings without wasting time, become an expert using Zoom for meetings with customers. These are things that we do inherently in Toastmasters meetings, but we don't build the language into our website so people can find us when they're searching for these resources. So digital advertising, fancy words. What are we talking about? It's a fancy term for social media. What is social media? Well, let's talk about the fact that social media is not designed to support advertising. Never was intended to be used for advertising. But of course, these organizations have realized there's money to be made in advertising. And so they've offered interesting options. For example, you can pay Google to advance your position to page one. You can pay what are called Google fees. And I've seen organizations spend unbelievable amounts of money. When I talk about unbelievable amounts of information, it can be as much as $5,000 a month just to get on page one, which I just look at that and I just think that's crazy. So when we deal with this area, we have to intrinsically understand that it works in a world of likes and dislikes, which is not helpful. How do you exploit the advertising features of social media when it only talks about likes and dislikes, which was intentionally designed to keep people and their information relatively private? And this is the big hurdle. And I watch people put resources into Facebook and resources into LinkedIn. And for years, I've wondered what is the benefit? And I've watched lots of resources spent in this area. And I have to share with you, in the last 3 years, one of my key clients has really made an investment. And when I say an investment, they've hired a full-time person for the past 3 years. And they've gone through 7 individuals. And only on the 7th hire was there an individual who effectively started positioning the company with Facebook and Google to actually generate leads. And so I watched that with great interest, lots of questions. How do you translate likes and dislikes into prospective clients? How do you do that? And that's something that I really watched and learned. That's what I want to share with you today. So now I'm going to introduce to you a concept that was new to me. And when I heard this, at first I didn't know what they were talking about. And essentially, they were talking about we need a landing page. What's a landing page? What are they talking about? And they're talking about essentially about your website. But the website is designed differently. It's designed that when someone comes to it, there's some sort of enticement, offering at the website. Maybe a brochure on how to run a meeting effectively, or Robert's rules, or how to use Zoom, some sort of enticement. It could be a video that you can download. It could be many things, but it's set up in such a way that you can't get it unless you provide to the website your name, your email address, and maybe your phone number. And that is very high yield information, because in the moment of doing that, not only are you a prospective lead, you're qualified. You not only are exhibiting interest in learning how to be a communicator, but you've taken the step. It's almost like a pre-sale where you've taken the step, okay, I'm willing now to give to this website my name, my email, my phone number. And that's the purpose of a landing page. So we can convert our websites into landing pages. And to some extent we try. There's you can click for more information, and it goes to a generic email that may or may not be monitored. But there has to be a serious strategy put in place of how that's done. And there needs to usually be an enticement. There's got to be a reason for the person visiting the site to give you that information. You got to give them something. It could be a PDF, could be a video, it could be maybe 10% off your membership fee. I don't know what it is, but you have to give them an enticement. So that is the way a web page can be turned into a landing page. Because the landing page has the job that it's bypassing likes or dislikes. The person's come to the website, and you're harvesting key informations about a qualified lead. Now there's a tool. Now we as Toastmasters clubs, often we use free hosts for a website. Some clubs will set up a Facebook account. I want to introduce a concept that many clubs should consider setting up a YouTube channel. We do speeches. We have the capacity to record them. And with the consent of the speaker, we can put those speeches onto YouTube. And again, people will search for it. Now there's a description when you upload a video, an MP4 file, that again will be triggered in searches. So you ought to really focus on the phrases, the keywords you put into that description to entice people to watch the video. And when you make a video, you want to coach the individual who has made the speech to end their speech with some phraseology. If you want more information on this topic, then you should consider going to our club at this web address and across the screen, or very, very easy to say. And so what you're doing is leveraging, someone does a search, they find you, there's a video, and in the video, you're sending them to the landing page. Because at this point, all you know is if they like you or dislike you. You can have followers, and the more that you do this, the longer the club is operating their channel, the more followers there's going to be. I just want to share with you, I've experimented with my own channel, and I've spent a bit of time focusing on Robert's Rules of Order, and I'm quietly amazed at the individuals who contact me through this YouTube channel I have. I had a fascinating conversation with a district director for the United Kingdom. They had taken my entire series. They were astonished with the information that was put forward in my videos. And they wanted to ask me to come to be a keynote speaker at a district event, which I found quite interesting. But it spoke to me the power of taking something we already do, which is doing speeches, and we can now take this medium. And again, watching a video yourself, this is a great way to improve. If the person's not comfortable with their video, great. When they do their redo, then you can redo it again. Maybe you want to only do this with advanced members, with their consent. It's a planned event like this event I'm recording. And because I'm recording it, I'm going to be sharing it on my YouTube channel, and the division is free to share it as well. It just enhances, and it's free advertising for your club. But you need to build into the effort that you have a mechanism by which you encourage people to get to your landing page. And so doing this is easy. Zoom, which we all use, can record a speech into an MP4 file. Do I edit them? No. I just do the speech as I do the speech. I put a little thumbnail on the front of it, and I do a little description, and I upload it. It is a gateway to the internet, and a lot of people are visually driven, and all the things that work for us as communicators in any time we're doing a presentation works in YouTube because it's a visual environment. And so I encourage you to consider adding this as a tool in your advertising, but it's work. And this is the point I'm constantly making about advertising. You can spend money may not get the results you're looking for, or you can commit to some time resources that you package to promote and advertise your club. Here is an example of what happens when you have a YouTube account. There's a funny little tab in the top left corner. It says your videos. You click it and you're brought into YouTube Studio. Now, I just pulled this off yesterday and I found it fascinating. Your channel has 216 views in the last 28 days. And you can see the topics that I have. Robert's Rules in Action, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. A speech I did on the Latin in terms of legal terminology, how to make a motion to adjourn. So you can see all the phrases that are in here. How do I do a motion to adjourn? How do I second a motion? And people are drawn to my channel and they will see my video. And I have built a following over time over this. And it's a very powerful form of advertising that most Toastmasters Club do not in any way take advantage of. They want to advertise, they want to get prospects in, they want to sell memberships, but they're not using this advertising tool. And it's not difficult to do. Once you have access to your channel, then you just click up here, create, and it asks you to just upload the MP4 file. You do I do a picture, a JPEG. I use snipping tool of the first page of my PowerPoint, and that's my lead photo. And then I input this phraseology, and I build in hooks. So you can gain followers, and you will start showing up not only in searches for images and videos, but you'll also show up over time in regular searches. So it's a marvelous way of enhancing your advertising strategy in the social media environment. So the challenge is that you need, and I cannot say this often enough, you need to tell stories. This client of mine is in the business of helping people have algae-free ponds. And they actually went out with one of their customers. They got a drone and they took pictures of the pond, and they had the pond owner talking about their product and service. And I found it fascinating because it was a 25-minute video laced with phrases, laced that were searchable phrases. And the companion narrative followed exactly what the images were saying. And this client of mine has learned very quickly that every time they have someone on the phone, can you send us a video of your pond? You have a little beach with it. You have boats floating on it. And they just ask for and ask for and ask for little MP4 files, which people can do with their smartphones. They can do them with their smartphones, and they send in the pictures, and all that goes on to the Facebook site and the website. And is all, they write, this one full-time person just writes stories, story after story after story. How to make your pond look great in the spring. How to make your pond look great in the summer. What do you do with your pond at high temperature? How do you get clean water for you? I mean, it's variations on the same thing over and over again, but always being done telling the story. How you can be, as a fish farmer, can have better water. It's just variations on the same thing. You need to tell stories. You need to tell the stories in words, and you need to tell stories in visual images. And every time you present these, whether it is on your website or whether it is on something like YouTube channel, stories that you tell all have contained within them something that will send someone to your landing page. During a video, I have a great set of tips on how to use Robert's rules when running a meeting. If you want these tips, go to randallsforum.com, and there's a free package waiting for you to download. And so when they go to that, there it is, a little button, free choice, but they pick it, but you have to give your, we're going to send it to you by email. So we need your email address, and it's what's your name, and can you give it, option, you can give us your phone number, and then they get the PDF, and then you have that information, and that's a qualified lead. And then you have to have the discipline to follow up. Someone has to reach out and talk to that person directly to continue the selling process. Because advertising is the first part of a process of selling. There's no direct relationship. You advertise and people show up. It just doesn't work that way. It's part of a process. So let's talk about the roadmap. What's the roadmap for using social media? Step 1, open a Facebook page for your club, YouTube channel. Step 2, make your free host blog into a landing page, a mechanism where you're enticing someone, you're offering something for them to give you their name, email address, and phone number. Use Zoom to record your speeches. Have the speeches tell people about your landing page. You don't call it a landing page, but you can get this offering by going here. Love to see you. This is for you. Write an article about the speech. Post the written words not only on your website, but also use the same language in Facebook, and then use the same language when you set up the video in YouTube. Embed all the words with searchable phrases. In the case of my personal blog, I mentioned I'm a marriage commissioner, but marriage commissioners were also called justices of the peace. Randall will respond to the name Justice of the Peace. I'm just constantly putting everywhere I can phrases that will, when people do a search, will find me. Randall is a marriage commissioner in Regina. Randall is a notary public in Regina. Randall can do, the formalization of your agreement, your nuptial agreement before you get married. This can be done at the wedding rehearsal, and I use the word wedding and the word wedding and the word wedding over and over and over again to help people, when they search for these things, find my webpage. Step 5, make an effort to contact each person by phone and email. And this is work. I'm not saying it isn't work. And this is why I'm saying advertising is not free. It's work. Someone has to get to the job of talking to someone. We'd love to have you come out to the meeting. Here's the Zoom meeting number. Do you have Zoom? Would you like me to help you download Zoom onto your computer? Okay, here's the meeting number. And there's a password. Now, I have different opinions about passwords for Zoom meetings, but that's a matter of personal choice. When the person arrives, go out of your way to recognize them, welcome them, get them participating in one role or the other. If they don't participate in the meeting, at least ask them at the end of the meeting, how did you find the meeting? Ask them to come back. Ask them if they want to join. 1/3 of the time, they might join on the spot. Then, after the meeting's over, don't wait for the following week. Call them again in 72 hours. Spend time to learn their needs and encourage them to come back to the club for the next meeting. And when they show up the second time, now we ask for the order. And when we ask for the order, make it all kinds of baby steps. We're going to send you a membership form, or you don't even have to call it a membership form, an information form, so we have more information about you when you come to visit. And it's really a membership form, right? And you get their name, their address, all the basic information you need when you set up a new member. Then send them an invoice and tell them we have everything we need. When you're ready to join, just pay the invoice. We can send the invoice for the tool like Wave, so they can just give us our credit card and pay us right away. So an inherent part of the final part of selling is making the buying process really, really easy with all kinds of baby steps. So as you can see, advertising is a part of the entire selling process, and the selling process, closing the order, getting the member, that's what we're trying to do, inherently means we have to be prepared to ask for the order. So in the end, nothing replaces salesmanship. Advertising is a part of this process. I found this funny little moniker: smile, breathe, and ask for the order. So we have today really learned, and covered a whole bunch of different ideas. The expectation that you get results simply by advertising without any effort, it's not a rational idea. Advertising costs money or time, but it's not free. There's something called Tannstaffel. This goes back to a science fiction novel in the 60s by a fellow by the name of Robert Heinlein. His book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And it talks about how anyone arriving on the lunar colony, there's a gateway they have to go through with Tannstaffel. And usually newcomers ask, what's Tannstaffel stands for? Stands for there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, because on the moon, not only do you have to pay for your accommodation, not only do you have to pay for your food, not only do you have to pay for your water, but you have to pay for your air. Nothing is free. And so you can advertise without expending a lot of financial resources, but that doesn't mean there isn't a commitment of labor and time. You need to really focus what your target audience is, who you are selling to, and that will lead you to profile the type of presentations that you're going to record, that you're going to put on to resources like YouTube. This really is a focus on the lead generation process. You identify a lead and then you close a sale. Advertising does not replace the selling process. The idea that people will just show up at your meetings with paid memberships, I think we can all agree that just doesn't happen. So in the end, we need to ask for the order to get the sale. Those are the elements that are involved whenever we are working in terms of advertising in the social media environment. I'm now going to open the floor to, if anyone has any questions about using social media. Well, if I'm hearing none, therefore I'm going to pass control of our session today back to our host. Back to you, Dan.
Randall, before you go, are you going to share this? Are you going to have this on YouTube or something, this presentation?
Faye, I think that there was a handout I circulated to you, and you can certainly
I shared
put
it
that
in
into the
chat.
chat. Yes.
Yes, it's there in the chat, so everyone can access it. Thank you so much, Randall. That was a great presentation. I think Dan is still here, but he is going to have to leave pretty shortly. So Dan, did you have some words of closing tonight?